parts of the country have watched you in these days, our hearts, our minds, and so it's particularly meaningful to be here and to have you all come out after so many challenging days for your community, for your families, for your neighbors. So thanks very much, and I'm glad we could have an hour of fellowship together in the midst of everything else that's happening in the world. But my lesson today really is about the important degree to which we don't have to imagine a time in this country without birthright citizenship. Because for many, many decades before 1868, before the 14th Amendment, as we say, constitutionalizes birthright citizenship, makes it the law of the land, for many, many decades prior to that, Black Americans live under a regime that I would say is perhaps not so very different than immigrant Americans face today. A legal culture that is unsettled, troubled, open to and animated by debate, changing, punitive, threatening, really a reign of terror for Black Americans before the Civil War, one in which folks live at risk, subject to political winds, and always with the specter of being what in the 19th century we would call removed from the United States, and today we would call deportation. So when we wonder what is in front of us, I think this history of Black Americans is a cautionary tale about what it means to put people at risk and to ask people to live in conditions under which the politics of the day, the election of the president, the whims of a legislature, the racism and xenophobia that pervades this country then and today, to let that be the thing that guides our approach to who belongs and who does not. I hope this story goes some distance to helping us appreciate why we would want to resist that. I'm going to do this by way of sharing briefly the story of one of the characters from this book. It turns out this gentleman, George Hackett, who will be the focus of my talk today, is someone who emerged for me over time. But Hackett has come to be someone whose life, I think, really embodies the worst, but also the best of this struggle before the Civil War. Baltimore is a free city in a slave state in the decades before the Civil War, a growing, burgeoning, very important and sophisticated community of former slaves and their descendants who exist in a state that will continue to countenance the enslavement of people of African descent all the way through till 1864, to the eve of the end of the Civil War. And here, Hackett is born in 1807. It's just after the moment that free Black men lose the right to vote in Maryland. It's a fact I didn't know when I began this project, that Black men vote in the era after the Constitution is ratified in Maryland. And it's only in 1802 that the word white will be inserted in the Constitution and bar Black men from the polls. He lives until 1870. Just until the eve of ratification of the 15th Amendment that will go an important distance to restoring the right to vote to Black men in Maryland and across the country. And so his life has become in many ways emblematic of the story that I'm trying to tell. Now, it's important for me to take 2 minutes to mention the most notorious of U.S. Supreme Court decisions in this period, Dred Scott versus Sanford. I get the nods at Dred Scott. Thank you, Sandra Price, for giving me the nod for Dred Scott, which is oftentimes the way we tell this story, through Dred Scott. And it's important because Justice Taney, who is a Baltimorean, will indeed conclude in 1857 that no Black person enslaved or free, can be a citizen of the United States. But not so fast. Because in 1858, two free men of color will bring a case in Maryland to that state's high court. And they raise the Dred Scott question. Can free men of color sue in the state of Maryland? Can they bring cases in court? And you know what? The court in Maryland says, yes, they can. Yes, they can. And so here, now a state high court rejecting Dred Scott, persisting in this limbo, but importantly saying in Maryland, men like Hackett do have fundamental rights. The right to sue and be sued because they work for wages, because we don't want to create outlaws, that when we have, by 1857, 58, 75,000 free people of color in Maryland, we need to extend to them fundamental rights. This uneven condition. He will be among the first to join the Republican Party and to be an advocate for voting rights for African American men as soon as Maryland abolishes slavery in November of 1864. He's got voting rights on his mind, and now this is his chance. He will be the first to stand up and lobby the city council for public education for black children. He's been paying taxes, and believe me, complaining about it for decades. He's been paying school, no taxation without representation. That just is not a cry from the revolution. Men like Hackett picked that up, but now the city is going to create public schools for black children, and Hackett has his hand in this. Hackett is going to earn the moniker captain because he will lead the very first black militia in the city of Baltimore. Black men who will occupy the city streets, openly carry firearms, don themselves in uniforms, and make vivid, their claim for how their status has been transformed now with the Civil War. Hackett will lead this group in 1866 through the streets of Baltimore. It will be one of the very first post-war clashes between black and white in the city of Baltimore. Again, over this manifestation, this embodiment of rights long before Congress resolves the question. I like to think that rather than waiting for Congress, he's waiting for Congress to catch up with him, right? Hackett has always been on the cutting edge. Now, I started the beginning by telling you that George Hackett dies in 1870, which he does. Not before he will go to Washington yet again to lobby the new president, Ulysses Grant, for the terms of what will become the 15th Amendment and the guarantee of voting rights to African American men. And while he will pass away, the 15th Amendment indeed will be proposed by Congress and ratified. It will become the law of the land. And when the national celebration of the 15th Amendment is convened, it will, I think, remarkably be convened not in Washington, but in Baltimore. And not just anywhere in Baltimore, but in the square in front of that very city courthouse where Hackett had year after year, proceeding after proceeding, stepped in, gone before judges, magistrates, and made his case that he was a person with rights. Right there, where he had waged that struggle, is the national celebration, and everyone is there. And I don't know what your beliefs are, how they work, but I'm enough of a believer to think that Hackett, well, he wasn't there in body, he was certainly there in spirit. And that he would have deeply understood the meaning of what it meant for that celebration to take place in the place where he and others like him had labored for so many decades, to see the people he loved, his comrades, gathered there, along with dignitaries like Frederick Douglass and Martin Delany. I have to think he would have been deeply pleased. So with that, I'll stop and say thank you very much.